This is the complex blend from Two Stacks, so let's see how that complexity stacks up in this week's whiskey review. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Matt, I'm a whiskey nerd, and like I said, this week we're looking at the complex blend from Two Stacks, and they're not kidding when they say this is a complex blend. So let me get it into the glass and I'll tell you a bit more about it. Two Stacks aren't actually distilling their own whiskey. What they're doing is they're sourcing whiskey from the Great Northern Distillery and they're blending it in kind of unique ways to get different expressions at different maybe alcohol percentages or using different finishes to create different and unique vatings of whiskey. This is the first cut. It's their flagship blend and it's quite a complex blend. It's got 40% dark grain aged in virgin oak casks, 40% light grain aged in bourbon casks, 8% pot still aged in Oloroso sherry casks, 10% double distilled malt aged in bourbon casks, and 2% peated malt also aged in bourbon casks. So that's going to give you a lot of kind of grain sweetness. It's going to give you some biscuity shortbread notes. It's going to give you a bit of spice from that virgin oak inclusion. You're going to get a bit of fruitiness maybe from the pot still aged in sherry whiskey, and you're going to get maybe a hint of smoke on the back end from that 2% peated single malt. This is quite an interesting expression of whiskey. It's quite a unique kind of different vatting. It's very interesting and refreshing definitely to see how much they're being transparent. They're showing you where they get the whiskey, they're showing you what went into it, they're showing you it's this much of grain, it's this much of pot still, it's this much of peated, it's this much of malt, and that's quite refreshing, especially in this day and age when a lot of distilleries are starting up and they're sourcing whiskey, but they're not really being very transparent about where they're sourcing it from. This transparency is maybe one of the reasons why Two Stacks have gotten quite the following recently. They've got a group called the Two Stacks Nation and they're very active on Facebook and on Instagram, really showing off what Two Stacks is capable of, highlighting all the new blends that come out. And if you're a member of the Two Stacks Nation, let me know in the comments below because I'd love to say hi to you. Speaking of those other whiskies from Two Stacks, they've got a cask strength version of this. They've got versions of whiskey that were aged in apricot brandy. They've even got a Dram in a can. Now you might have seen this Dram in a can at stores, and it's a very interesting little fun way of having whiskey. It's 4 little cans of whiskey that you can take with you on the go. It's got plenty of nice whiskey in it and it's kind of good to share with friends. It kind of highlighting that whiskey isn't just for in a glass, it's not just for kind of sipping slowly. You can also have it on the go, you can enjoy it, something that you can kind of take with you on the go and just enjoy, and just I think it's kind of fun. For those Dram in a can, they've actually used this same whiskey because it is their flagship blend and it is a very good whiskey, so that's more than enough talking about it. Let's get into the nose and what it's like. Immediately on the nose, I'm getting plenty of vanilla. So it's a really rich sweetness coming through this whiskey. Like, there's a little bit of spice maybe behind it, but up front you're getting huge amounts of vanilla. Kind of like a caramelly, custardy, that kind of nice, dense, rich, thick, sweet vanilla. It's got a little bit maybe of biscuity notes, some cereal notes coming through. Like 80% of this whiskey is grain whiskey, so you're gonna get those cereal notes. You're gonna get those kind of lighter, sweeter, more floral notes coming through, rather than maybe those caramel notes you get from a malt. Now, those notes are still there. I mean, there's definitely some nice, round, richer sweetness coming through from that 10%, which is malt whiskey. I'm not getting a huge amount of the peated whiskey. Only 2% of the whiskey is peated whiskey, but it's not really coming through in the nose. And in terms of the pot still whiskey, I'm getting some spice there, but it's not strong enough maybe in the nose for me to figure out if it's the pot still spices or if it's maybe the kind of the virgin oak spiciness coming through. So let's go in for the palate and see how it changes. On the palate, definitely getting a lot more spiciness coming through. The sweetness is there, yeah, but up front you're getting a lot more spice. That kind of barrel char, that's coming through. It's kind of slightly drying. It's nice. It has that sweetness though to balance it out, so it's not too drying, it's not too far in one direction, but it is quite spicy up front. That was quite dominating up front, so I think I'm going to go in again. I always say go in for a second sip, see what else you find once your mouth adjusts to the whiskey. So I'm going to go in again and see what else I can find. Okay, again, that spiciness is there, but I'm able to get more of a kind of a caramel sweetness, where in the nose it was all vanilla, it was all nice, it was all light. I'm getting more of a rich, deeper kind of palate on this whiskey. It is quite nice still, it's quite approachable, there's still some fruitiness. It's not maybe orchard fruits, it's maybe moved into like something like a peach or that kind of juicier fruit, kind of definitely down on the kind of rounder, richer notes in this whiskey. Again, in terms of the pot still and the peated whiskey, they're not really making a huge impression. Maybe they're just kind of adding to generally the richness, the roundness of this whiskey. I got a hint of the peat smoke at the very end, but that's more of the finish. In the palate, I don't think it really shows up. So I'm going to go in again. I'm going to talk about the finish this time. Okay. On the finish, the sweetness does fade quite quickly, and that allows that kind of peated note to come up. Now, you're not going to be telling anyone that this is a peated whiskey. It's quite a light note. It's quite like a mellow note. It's just like a breeze of smoke coming across rather than being a properly peated whiskey. It kind of just serves to highlight some of those other notes. Like, you notice the absence of the sweetness because that peat comes through, but really that doesn't hang around too long either. The spiciness of the pot still, I think, comes through a little bit. I always get like a peppery, spicy note from the pot still whiskey, and there is a bit of spiciness that hangs around in this finish, but it's less of that oak spice. It's more of a kind of a white pepper spiciness. So that's coming through, and maybe that's where you're getting that pot still influence in this whiskey. It is also coming in at 43% alcohol. Now, it's not going to knock your socks off, but it does mean it's quite a nice, easy to approach whiskey. It's not going to kind of burn the mouth off you, it's not going to burn the nose off you, but it's going to carry a bit more flavour than if it was bottled at 40%. And really, I think that shows that a lot of care has gone into the bottling of this whiskey. Two Stacks, like I said, they're not making this whiskey, but they've definitely taken a bunch of different whiskies and they've made something unique from all those whiskies. This is kind of showing what the art of blending is all about. It's not just about distillation. Now, obviously, if you distill whiskey and then you blend the whiskey together, you can get a lot more control on the final product you put out. But Two Stacks is showing that that's not always just the case. Like, you could take a distilled whiskey and just put it out into market, or you could do what they're doing and create something unique, create something special, create something different that's still easy to enjoy, but also has a bit of complexity. I mean, this whiskey did have a lot of complexity coming through it. The nose was different to the palate was different to the finish, and the finish, of course, was different to the nose. So it was quite nice to see that evolution in the glass. It's an easy whiskey to drink. Like, the heavy predominance on that grain whiskey is going to make it easy to drink, it's going to make it easy to enjoy, but the bit of complexity in there, the bit of malt, the bit of peat, the bit of pot still is going to give you something else that you can look for in the glass. So I think it's a very good whiskey for someone who's maybe just getting to know whiskey, someone who just wants to maybe add into a cocktail, or someone who wants to kind of sit with a glass and enjoy and see what they can find. So let me know in the comments below if you've had Two Stacks whiskey, or if you've had any of the other whiskies from Two Stacks. I'd love to get your perspective on what you think about this whiskey. Is it maybe too simplistic, or does it have enough depth that a real whiskey kind of connoisseur can enjoy? If you've tried the other whiskies from the Two Stacks blend, how do you think they stack up against this whiskey? I think this is where I'm going to leave this review. I put in new whiskey reviews every Wednesday and cocktail recipes every Friday. So I'm going to keep on enjoying this one. I'll see you next time. Sláinte.